Hello everybody and welcome back to our next reading session. Today's date is Thursday the 14th of May 2020 and our Can I question is, can I find out information about a character by referring closely to the text? Underline today's date and Can I question. You'll just need a pen and a pencil, a piece of paper, and a ruler would be useful for this one too. You can either do this on paper or again, you can do it straight onto your journal on Class Dojo. Pause the video to get yourself prepared and then we'll get started. Okay, so we're going to take a closer look at our character in the story, Mrs. Tredegar, okay, the lady here. And we're going to think about what we know from the story. So what information we can find out about Mrs. Tredegar that is in the text. Okay, so it's clearly there for us. We don't need to do much thinking around it. It's written plain and simply in the text, so we know something about her. And we're going to think about what we can infer. So when we infer something or we use inference, the answer might not necessarily be straightforward in the text. We need to do what we call read between the lines. So use some clues and evidence to do a little bit of thinking about what perhaps the author is trying to tell us about a character without necessarily putting it in black and white. So what I would like you to do is divide your page into two, or use the table that I've put onto Class Dojo. So divide your page into two and pop these headings in, please. What I know and what I can infer. And what I would like you to do is try to complete this table with three things that we know and we can find out from the text. So it's written down for us. We just need to retrieve it, okay, and remember it. So you might want to go back and watch the videos of the green ship if you can't remember. And also what we can infer. So what perhaps Quentin Blake hasn't written down, but we've got some clues and some evidence in the text that when we think about it, we can say, oh, that might mean that Mrs. Tredegar is like this, or that might mean that Mrs. Tredegar thinks this. Okay, so I've written some questions to help you to think about this. For example, what I know. So, what do we know about where Mrs. Tredegar lives? Can you remember from the story? Does she live in a small house or does she live in a big house? What did it say? What information do we have about her garden? Was it like the children's gardens or was it different to the children's gardens? I'm just going to read you a section from the text to help you. I can remember very clearly, even now, what it was like when we climbed over the wall into the garden of the big house. So we know that Mrs. Tredegar lives in a big house. And we also know, as it says in the text, over the wall, it wasn't much like the kind of garden we were used to, more like a park or even a forest. So it's a big house with a large garden like a forest. So that's what we know from the text. That's what we've seen, that's what we've read about. So remember, you can always go back, rewatch some of the videos where I've been reading the story to find out a bit more information. Another thing about what we know, how is Mrs. Tredegar described in the book? Can you describe her appearance? So what does she look like based on the illustrations or something that has been mentioned in the book? And finally, does Mrs. Tredegar like spending time in her garden? Is there evidence to show us that she spends a lot of time there? What does she do in the story? Okay, now what we can infer, some things that perhaps we're reading between the lines to think about. So what can we infer about Mrs. Tredegar's personality? How would you describe it and what evidence can you find? Is she a cruel lady? Is there evidence to show she's cruel? Or perhaps you think she's a kind lady? What evidence do you think there is to show she's kind? Who do you think the captain is in the story? And how do you think Mrs. Tredegar knew him? Now, he's mentioned a few times. We see the picture. She also mentions him as she invites them back around for tea. And she also mentions him when they're faced with a storm. So how do you think they know each other? Why would she have a picture of him there? What's their relationship? So what can you infer about that? Quentin Blake doesn't tell us, but what clues have we got? What evidence have we got that we know about their relationship? And finally, is Mrs. Tredegar pleased that the children come and play on the green ship? Now, it doesn't say Mrs. Tredegar was really pleased that the children came back, but there is evidence that she is pleased. So what is that evidence? How do we know? What does she do? Okay, so try and answer those questions to write down 3 things, so write it in full sentences please, that we know about Mrs. Tredegar, and 3 things that we can infer so we can read between the lines and get a bit more information about this character. Remember, as I said before, you can always go back and re-listen to some parts of the story to get a bit more information to help you. Pause the video and then come back if you like, because I've got some examples to show you if you get stuck. So if you're happy, carry on, and if you get stuck, come back to the video. If not, you can listen to one example that I give you now. So for the first one, what do we know about Mrs. Tredegar? Well, we could say something like, Mrs. Tredegar, oh, that says live, we want lives. Mrs. Tredegar lives, let's just correct that. Mrs. Tredegar lives in a big house with a large garden. In her garden, she has a ship made from trees and bushes. Now we know that that's written in black and white for us. The author has told us that information. We didn't need to read between the lines because it's written there. Now, what can we infer? So, what type of personality does she have? What's she like? Mrs. Tredegar is a kind lady because, oh, that's good. I'm explaining my thinking, referring to the text by using because. She invites the children to play, gives them tea, and takes them on pretend adventures. So I've inferred, it doesn't tell me that she was a kind lady in the text, but I've inferred from what she does that she is kind, and I've said why, so what the evidence is. Hopefully that makes it clear about what I want you to do. 3 things that you know about Mrs. Tredegar, 3 things that you can infer about her, so use clues to help you. Write those in and I'll reveal some more examples to you at the end so you can check your answers. Okay, so pause the video now, go away and have a go for yourself and come back to check your answers. Okay, here are some more answers for you. So I've put here what I know about her. I know she's a thin lady from her description and she has grey hair. That's what I noticed in the illustrations. And here, this question was asking me about the relationship with the person in the photograph. And I've put, Mrs. Tredegar had a husband who was in the army or navy. She refers to him as the captain. I think that she is a widow now, so that's someone whose husband or wife has died, because he isn't around, but there is a picture of him with his telescope in the ship. And I think she's put that picture there to remind her of him. So I think that they were husband and wife, and I think that they were married, and I think that he's not around anymore, but perhaps his job was in the navy to do with ships. Okay, and our final one I've put, Mrs. Tredegar spends a lot of time in her garden playing with the children. She must enjoy spending hot summer days outside. And for this one here, I've put Mrs. Tredegar enjoys the children's company because she lives alone now. Okay, so I think that she lives alone, apart from the gardener, there doesn't seem to be anybody else around. And the evidence is also because the children keep visiting her year after year. And if she didn't enjoy them being there, she wouldn't invite them back again. Okay, I hope that's given you some ideas and that your ideas are along the right lines. Come back later on today and we'll finish up our story.